Welcome everyone to another unusual video. Today I'm going to be doing a bit of a show and tell and a bit of, maybe theory of operation and some interesting facts about my apprentice's new CRT monitor from 1992. So yeah, you can see my whole setup here. I'm running to 5 because it really fits well with the monitor. And my homemade vacuum tube amplifier. It really complements the setup, also being older technology. Well, anyway, without further ado, let's get right into it. Here we go. Now you can get a better view of the CRT. I'm gonna turn on Toho 5 again, so we have a bit of background. Here we go. There we go. Turn this maybe a bit up. Changing the volume on my amplifier. Alright, so some of you might be asking, what even is a CRT and what does it stand for? Well, CRT is the abbreviation of cathode ray tube, which is a technical term which is denominating this display technology, which, as you might guess, is a bit older by today's standards. But hey, this was the standard until the 2010-ish days, where flat screen displays took over the market because they had better power efficiency and they were a bit more practical. Because CRTs are really heavy because it's basically a vacuum tube made out of glass. Again, vacuum tube and all of that. It's a bit technical, but I hope I can explain what this is all about in this video and some of the interesting advantages that this display technology has over normal flat screens like LCD, OLED, or even normal LED illuminated displays. There's a few more. I don't know all the display technologies, but these have some interesting can compare some interesting stuff with LED displays and CRTs. Other than that, this is a really iconic display technology because it pretty much was, I don't know how to say it, it's like everything when something becomes nostalgic. It has like a magical feeling every time you use it. But I'm getting ahead of myself. This monitor is from 1992. It's old even for CRT standards. Monitor standards. It's completely analog, so it has no internal display controller. You can see I can analog move the image around. I can squeeze it, can stretch it, and this is done with potentiometers. There's no buttons or anything. You can move it left and right as well. You have your contrast, is this knob, and then you have your brightness, which is this knob. And I'm gonna obviously put a flashing lights warning in the beginning of the video. Come on, focus. There we go. Alright, so let's get a bit into the advantages of such a display, but first I'm gonna change the game. Alright, now I got here Toho 6 running, and let me tell you about some of the interesting things that happen in the CRT display technology. You can see a bit of artifacting on the camera, but you can't see that in real life, so you have to just don't think it's there, and the colors look also way better. But anyway, so you might have, if you are a bit in the retro gaming community, You might have heard about the CRT hype and all around it. You might be thinking, why are people wanting to play stuff on these old systems and these old screens? Well, first of all, there is motion clarity. And not to mention the pixel accuracy and the effect that the CRT monitors give the things you play on them. But yeah, I have mentioned motion clarity, so I'll get into what that means and a few of the examples. So yeah, let's do that. I'm gonna show off what is the difference between motion clarity and normal displays. So I'm gonna have to bring up a setup here again. 1 second. Alright, so I have brought up the motion clarity tester here, and I apologize for the shaky video because I have to grab my phone with my hands now to actually show you what the difference is, because if you look on your mobile phone display, that's obviously not a CRT, so you're not gonna get the real feeling how well you can track the image, in this case the flying UFO, with your eyes. But yeah, you can't do that on the phone screen, so I will have to simulate your eyes with the phone. You can see the phone has trouble every time I move it to sync the refresh rate of the CRT. CRTs are notoriously hard to film, so you have to take it with a grain of salt again. Hey, if I get close here and track the UFO with the phone, you can see if the phone focuses how good the image looks. It looks like it's static for a second. Let me get it good again. There it was. You can see every time it focuses, the UFO looks like it's just a still image. That's the great thing about CRTs. They have almost infinite motion clarity. And let's see that on a normal OLED display. So I'm gonna change and show you that. So I got my standard monitor connected here. This is a bit older OLED monitor by now. But hey, the technology doesn't really change that much. And yeah, the difference is night and day. If I do the same test and track the UFO, you can't see its face. It's completely blurred. You can see the after image. Just like that. And yeah, this has nothing to do with refresh rate or anything like that. I mean, it kinda does, but it's a bit more complicated than that. That was another good shot. So yeah, I'm gonna do a technical explanation why the difference happens. So let me set that up. Well, I got the explanation set up here so I can draw around. So yeah, to understand why CRTs have such a superior motion clarity over LCD or IPS or OLED displays, we have to understand how the human eye works and how the display in itself works. So, you know how the illusion of movement works. That you basically swap still images around at a relatively high frequency. You have, that's what the FPS are, or the refresh rate, which can be either, there has been a few, like in the animation world, you can see something like 24 FPS or 12 FPS, and then you have the screens, which are, usually 30 FPS, 60 FPS, 75, 120, and in today's days they even go to 300 and 240 and 325 FPS. And the newest ones I've seen even go to 524, which is insane, just to make the motion clarity better. They have to be that fast when they have OLED technology to get a bit close to what CRTs are capable of. And yeah, at that point the efficiency really drops down, so you scratch your head and begin to question if it's even worth it. But hey, I'll not get into what all of that is, everyone is on its own on that. So how does the CRT work that it's such a magic in comparison to CRTs? I mean to the other display types. So it's pretty simple. You have your display, which we are gonna draw here in this rectangle, and a CRT really doesn't have any, illuminated pixels at the same time. It's all a dot. So yeah, you got your dot, or in this case, because it's a color CRT, you have 3 dots. Like this. This is all what the beginning is. And yeah, this is what comes out of the electron gun. You have 3 beams. Then you have your phosphor. Your phosphor is what the pixels represent. And what is phosphor? Well, phosphor is just a material that converts, in this case, I think it's UV light to different light colors. And can represent here the pixels like this. It's not really that important. There's thousands of other YouTube channels that are going to explain this way better than I'm ever going to do, but I'll try it anyways. So you got your beams, and you can say 1 pixel represents 3 phosphor dots. In this case, we would have red, green, and blue, like usual. RGB is what every display technology relies on to display color, because you mix those lights together and you get all the different other lights. You know the drill. All 3 together is white, everything off is black, and that's what we are interested in. In this case, if we get an image, you can say, for example, for the image we want this on, we want this pixel on and this pixel on, RGB, and this pixel on, for example. So what is the CRT going to do here? So, as I said, the CRT only makes a beam of 3 lights. And to make an image, we actually have to understand how the deflection works in CRTs, which is another interesting thing, which is only really a thing in CRTs. So, the CRT tube looks like this. This is a kind of approximation of how the CRT tube looks. The pins on the back here. Here's the electron gun. And this is the glass shape. It's shaped like this weird bell. This got your screen on this side. This is a side view. You look here. And yeah, the beam fires out of this. Here you got your 3 beams. And here's the anode supply. This is high voltage on here. So I could go into the detail that the electron gun is accelerated electrons that shoot out of a sort of vacuum tube. You have grids and stuff and specific voltages, a heater and all of that you have to worry about to get this to work. But we are only interested in the deflection. The deflection is done with the deflection yoke, which is usually a part here, which looks like a strange bell, and you got your wires coming out of here. You have pretty much 4 coils. You have 2 on the side and 2 on top and on the bottom, which are wound differently. I could actually show a deflection yoke to you. 1 second, I have one lying around. Okay, I found the deflection yoke. it's this sci-fi looking thing. You can see it. It would sit like this in relation to the drawing I did here. And ignore this I drew here, because the phone didn't register my finger and I thought it was recording, but in fact it wasn't. So anyway, I'm gonna explain this again. Oh, here you got your wires for your deflection coils. We got one set of coils here, which is these two. These move the electron beam up and down. This is the vertical deflection. And then you get two sets of coils which are under this big ferrite here, which is the horizontal deflection, which moves them left and right. Yeah, if you look in this sense, of course, in front, here would be the screen, a bit up, of course. This would be left and right, and this would be top and bottom. Anyway, it's a bit more complicated. You can see some compensation coils, ion trap magnets for the convergence and all of that, but we are not interested in that. That's topics for a more in detail video. We just want to know why the motion clarity difference is so big. So I already drew this here. You can see if we can move this electron beam up and down and left and right, what do we get? We get something that we can move around the screen. But we are not going to move it around in a crazy fashion to light up pixels. This is what the CRT does. It starts at the beginning on the top corner and it moves in one direction, a bit down in one direction, a bit down in one direction, down, 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 travels like this. This is the horizontal deflection. In television sets, this is usually 15.68 something kilohertz. And you can actually hear it when it runs. You can hear the psee sound. It's a really high-pitched whine. That's because the flyback, which generates the high voltage for the I don't know if it's the cathode or anode, I don't remember, but it generates the high voltage for the CRT tube, is driven with these coils, with the left-right coils. They are connected here, so they pretty much save on components. That's why they do it in that way. But in monitors, because you don't want to have that much eye strain, they actually do it differently. They have the transformer, in this case this flyback transformer, has a capacitor which actually makes the high voltage here steady. They don't drive the coils in parallel with the flybacks because the refresh rate has to change on a PC. You have 60 hertz, you have 30 hertz, and if you change the frequency of the flyback with the coils together, then the whole balance of the high voltage would be thrown off and it wouldn't work. So they just do it separately. Okay, so going back to the theory of operation. We have these three beams that travel down the phosphor. And it travels, again, I'm going to draw the example. You have the pixels. So it's going to be a really low resolution screen right here. You have your 3 pixels. Is this in 6? We have, this is 1 pixel, another pixel, another pixel, and another pixel. Take it with a grain of salt. But the beam travels down these pixels. And we can either illuminate these or we don't. And we do that by cutting the emission of the electron beam. Just turn it off if we don't need it. So in addition to moving this electron beam around, we actually have on the electron gun, we have our circuit, which in this case would be a double pair of transistors, which would be our deflection amplifier, or in this case our beam amplifier. These are basically told, hey, turn off, turn on, turn off, turn on. We have flickering, it flickers the beams. Do we want red? Do we want green? Do we want blue? And it runs the signal on these amplifiers. So these individual beams can be turned off and on, or yeah, for the brightness control, they just adjust all of them at once. And for the color correction as well, you can say this amplifier amplifies a bit more, the other one a bit less, and so on and so forth. So yeah, if you want black, well, we just turn this off, no beam, but it's still, the deflection still travels. So if you want to illuminate a specific pixel, and this is getting a bit cramped here, so let me get a new paper. Of course, it's the most beat up paper I can find. There we go. We have our screen again, so let me draw this here again. And if, for example, say we want to draw a circle, so we have our pixel lines like this. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, and 3. So if your pixels, which are these 3 edges, and of course pixels don't really, apply on, you can really make defined shapes. All the shapes are formed in pixels. You have just higher resolution and it looks better. So in this case, if these are pixel definitions here, we have 1, 2, 3. We would illuminate these, and these. In this case, obviously, this would be RGB, and yeah, it would look more like this, with these defined in itself as pixels. But yeah, you get the idea. The beam would travel down this lane, down, this would do the deflection. At this point, the electron gun amplifier would be told, hey, turn on! So it turns on. It travels this small distance, which would be in this case about, I don't know, if it's a small circle, it would be like 5 or 6 pixels. And this deflection obviously travels pretty fast in a computer monitor. So around 100 kilohertz, I think, is what the flyback runs at. So you just have a few milliseconds, if not microseconds, of distance that this beam travels, and it gets told, here you turn on, and it illuminates this specific pixels. In case when we want this white, then all of them are illuminated. So the three beams fire for this short distance at this point. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, travels back, here it turns off again, travels again, here it turns on again, travels further, here it turns on again on the next lane, and it travels down, down, down. End of the screen. And on the next refresh, it starts again on the top. This, if the beam travels from the top from the bottom, that's 1 frame, 1 refresh of the whole CRT display. And yeah, the funny thing is, yeah, the beam is really small. It's just 3 beams that illuminate 3 pixels. So the screen can only really illuminate 1 pixel at a time. And here comes the cool part. The phosphor has a specific, back illumination time. It holds a bit of light. You know, like those glowing toys that you put into the light. They keep glowing in the dark. That's phosphor. It works like that. But here, the phosphor is way less, it stores way less light. It stays illuminated for a bit less, or a magnitude less of those glowing toys. But it works in the same principle. So what happens? All this around this small image stays black. We have true black, which is not really what makes the motion clarity, but in the movement it makes the motion clarity. Let me explain. Because this image here is also really only on for 1 pixel at a time. In this case, these lines are called scan lines because it scans down the screen. It moves downwards, so it's the scanning frequency is another term you can use. But yeah, by doing it in this way, you trick the human eye to think that it's way sharper than it is. And that's why the CRT looks so good. Because let's compare it to the theory of operation of an LED display. How would an LED display tackle the same issue? We have our display, we have our LED pixels, and draw some random lines to get the idea. We have our circle, and the LEDs would just, they would turn on, because you know how an LCD works, right? You have your panel and the pixels are physically LEDs that can light up, or they are in LCDs, they are like light converters. They let a specific light wavelength through, and so they make the color RGB again. Or they have LEDs, they are RGB again. I can put a few examples on the screen so you can understand what I mean with that. But yeah, you just have to understand that the LEDs light up. The LEDs as well have a phosphor inside them, so they need time to turn off as well. But the thing is that because LED displays, you could say, for the frame, I can just leave this on if it stays white. So they leave it on. So one frame would be, turn these LEDs on for X amount of milliseconds, which is 2 frames in the specific refresh rate. But they don't turn off. You just leave them on. That's the thing. The individual pixels stay on. So if they have to change in the next pixel, and for example the circle moves to this position, and we turn on the next sets of LEDs, our eyes think that they are together because all of these LEDs were on, because it's such a short time. So if this moves in the CRT, the difference is it's built up pixel by pixel, because the scan line moves down. So it makes like a snake movement. It would look like the circle would pixel, then it would move the upper pixel first, pixel, and it moves the next pixel. So it looks like it's snaking along the screen. But with LEDs, it just makes one, next. That's the difference. Because everything around the screen or the circle is black, because it only draws 1 pixel at a time. In this case with the 3 electron beams, 1 pixel would be RGB. If it's black and white, it would actually only be 2 colors. It would only be black and white. But we are not interested in black and white. So that's the magic difference. You pretty much, the motion clarity difference comes, this is now the wrap up of this, it comes from the fact that everything is black all the time. And so for the high-end LED displays, the manufacturers figured out that you can do the same effect by making the LEDs actually turn off before they move to the next side. That is called black frame insertion, and some of the higher end monitors have that feature. The only problem is it takes a lot of processing power for the display, and you need LEDs that are super fast with some incredibly low or high speed phosphor in this case that loses the light energy in a fraction of a millisecond. So you can insert those black frames where you turn all the LEDs on, all the LEDs off, I mean, so it looks black, and then you turn on the next pixel. The problem also here comes from that if you have millions of LEDs on a screen, you have to imagine you have thousands and thousands of pixels. You have to address those. Some IC has to have all the pins that go to every individual pixel on the screen. While on the CRT, you just have a beam, 3 beams with 3 amplifiers that can control the intensity of the beam. And then you have 4 magnetic coils, 1, 2, 3, 4, to move it around the screen. It's so much more simple. The whole magic comes from the video signal and all the video amplification and all of that. That's the difficult part on the CRT. That what actually converts the video signal into the analog movement, which is translated into the magnetic impulses into the coils and all of that. But again, in reality it's such a simpler engineering problem than having to design an IC that controls millions of LEDs on a screen, and that it does it fast, and that you have black frame insertion and all of that. So that's a so much more daunting problem than moving 3 beams on a surface of pixels around. But yeah, you get the motion clarity problem. Yeah, that would be about it about the whole motion clarity thing. And yeah, that's why if you put an CRT on, let's say, 120 Hertz, it looks like it would be a LED monitor running at 300 Hertz or even higher. Because yeah, the scanning happens so quick at that point that it looks extremely smooth in comparison to a LCD or a OLED or IPS screen. And yeah, CRTs can be overclocked. You can increase the horizontal scan speed. Even my CRT can run at 75 Hertz, but the screen shrinks. You know why? Because the coils fire sooner. They move the beam faster, so because they start quicker, you don't start on the edge of the screen anymore. You start here, for example, and the speed gets increased. You can see it. You'll increase the speed, so the beam starts sooner and doesn't stop. So it only makes then a smaller portion of the screen because it starts sooner, because it goes faster. You pretty much crunch everything down, but the pixels don't get smaller, so you lose resolution. But yeah, it definitely goes faster. So if you have a big CRT, you can get higher refresh rates at lower resolutions, and it shrinks the screen down. That's a bit much for my CRT because it only has 640 by 480. That's like nothing of resolution in today's standards. So running it at a higher frequency doesn't really have it doesn't really, yeah, I would say it doesn't enhance the experience because you lose a lot of screen, which you don't really have much screen from the beginning. So yeah, that's my explanation on the overclocking of CRTs, so you can increase the refresh rate. Which on my CRT, you can still see the flickering at 60 Hertz. If you move around, it's a bit annoying, but yeah, you don't have to pay the attention. At 75 Hertz, you don't see anything anymore. But as I already told, you at 75 Hertz, you lose so much screen on a 640 by 480 CRT that there is no point on doing it, even if it looks really good and it's like so smooth that you don't really think a display is there. But yeah, I don't really mind the flickering. The motion clarity is so good, even at 60 Hertz, that it doesn't really matter. So yeah, that wraps up the motion clarity thing, I think. So let me think what's another of the interesting facts of CRTs. Well, if you really think about it, that's really the only advantage that CRTs have over modern flat screen displays. So with that said, you know in reality the only advantage that CRTs have, which, yeah, with the development of new technologies in screens, is probably going to get taken from CRTs at some point in the future. But okay, let's talk some of the disadvantages of CRTs. The main disadvantage is obviously glaring, because you have a glass screen. You have glaring. Things reflect off glass because it has to be relatively thick, because the whole thing is under high vacuum, so the electrons can fly through. Else they wouldn't move anywhere, because they would collide with air molecules. So you have your CRT here, which has a thick glass front panel, and all the rest is also made out of kind of thick glass. You even have a metal band on some of them, all the modern ones, which is a safety against implosion. The other thing is, these things basically work like X-ray tubes. So there's a whole conspiracy that you're getting irradiated and all of that. Those problems are pretty much already solved, but yeah, the CRTs still emit some X-rays, because if you know how an X-ray tube works, which is pretty much, you have a heated filament, which is also the electron gun also has 3 heated filaments, because you have 3 guns for 3 colors. It's pretty much the same as an X-ray tube. X-ray tube works like this. You have a heated filament and you have some tungsten or copper or something material. You heat this up so electrons fly off, and then you accelerate them with a really high voltage. In case of 60 kilovolts or even 100 kilovolts, most CRTs only run up to 40 kilovolts, which is probably the reason why they don't emit X-rays, because they are just at the threshold that the electrons are actually so fast that they travel and go through the glass and leave the screen, which they only accelerate that much that they hit the phosphor. But in X-ray tubes, they accelerate them so much that they crash into the metal, and they emit X-rays, which is pretty much a really high energy light that you can't really see, but it's there, and it somewhat behaves like radiation, but it has way more energy, so it can actually travel through objects and metal, through metal if you have enough power, but it can still travel through metal. That's how they X-ray your airport luggage, or they do tests on welds in industrial applications. They use X-ray tubes. That's my small intermission on one of the disadvantages of CRTs. They are kind of fragile and they can be somewhat dangerous, even if the internal circuitry fails and, for example, this voltage increases for some reason. Then you have a risk of X-rays and you can get irradiated, which is not fun. The other problem is I have a light table. I can't reuse the same paper on this side. Very funny. All of these are already scribbled. Do I have another scribbled paper? Maybe. This one is pretty good. You can ignore that, right? Okay. Blooming is the other problem of CRTs. You still have a bit of afterglow on the phosphor. So, for example, if we have our screen and we again have our pixel raster, we, for example, say we want this, a semi-sphere of white in the corner, and the beam lights these pixels up. We have a few problems that can happen. We can have bad convergence, which means that the beam is not aligned with the pixels, so it shifts a bit, and you can see half of the next pixel illuminating. That usually looks like you can see shadows of red, green and blue on white images. That can happen. And setting up the convergence and that the beams are aligned and all of that can be a bit tricky. So you never get it perfect. So you always have a bit of red, green and blue shadows on white surfaces. And mentioned, which I started this, which is blooming. And what does blooming mean? Well, you pretty much illuminate these phosphors, so some light is going to travel over to the next phosphors, which doesn't help the convergence. So the next phosphors light up a bit. So if you have this white radius, it's gonna look like it's blinding you. There's gonna be a bit of white traveling into the black if all of this would be black. So you have it looks like when you squint your eyes and you can see a bit of white shadow on, for example, on street lights and all of that. It can do that effect that it doesn't look sharp anymore, per se. And yeah, blooming also happens in movement. If you have a ball, for example, moving in this direction, you're gonna have a bit of afterglow. Yeah, the ball is still gonna look sharp. You're gonna have a perfectly sharp ball, but it's gonna leave a white trail when it moves. Which, yeah, it's not gonna really happen with LEDs, but the ball itself is gonna look bigger. That's the thing. You're gonna have that white afterglow, but it's gonna look like a shadow. It's a different thing that this ball, for example, if it has an R on it, it's traveling downwards, it's still gonna look sharp, the R. Whilst on the LED screen, you maybe not gonna have the specific afterglow, but the whole thing is gonna look something like this. So yeah, that's one of the disadvantages of CRTs. And yeah, the other disadvantages are they are heavy like stones, they draw a lot of electricity, yeah, and they are bulky and they don't have a good efficiency. And yeah, all of that, the list goes on, you could say, in today's consumer mind. But yeah, those would be some of the disadvantages of CRTs. Whilst, it's a toxic balance between you have a good screen versus, yeah, I can have a big screen and it's light. With a CRT, you have a small screen, which is heavy, which draws a lot of electricity, while you have on LCDs, you have a big screen, which is efficient, you can look at things sharper. So yeah, people are gonna choose the big screen because, yeah, the advantages of a CRT are so niche that it's really just a novelty. Because do you notice motion blur in gaming or something like that? I don't really think standard people are gonna want a CRT. I just remembered one of the other things that CRTs have, which blows LCDs out of the park or other screens that are not high-tech. Well, you can say gaming monitors still kinda hold up. But yeah, it's lag. It's screen lag. Because, yeah, most of the CRT is analog. The signal comes in, the digital signal, which is, oh, screen, this is a ball, convert this. It's analog. You don't really have a CPU that runs some clock that converts frame by frame, which takes a bit of time, and then it sends it to the controller, which drives the 5 bazillion LEDs on the screen. You don't have that. You just have, oh, this is digital. We have a digital to analog converter, which can be really, really, really fast. And then we say, ooh, deflection, ooh, here, turn this off, which is just analog signals, which happens really quickly. That's why you see most of the professional fighting game players, even to this day, the thing that comes to mind is Smash Melee players, which have, one frame button presses and all of that. They use CRTs, and for a really long time they have used CRTs, and you can see it in tournaments. And it's not because the console has an outdated video output. No, it's because CRTs are really freaking fast. So the image gets on the screen in an instant and not in like 12 milliseconds or 20 milliseconds, which, yeah, you can miss your input if you are really used to the screen. And yeah, people complain about lag all the time. I myself do as well. So yeah, it's not really noticeable in a casual fashion, but you can see how in a really competitive scene that would make a difference. And yeah, I think with that I have rambled in this video pretty much long enough. So yeah, those are some of the advantages and disadvantages of CRTs, which again, the biggest one is the one I explained in the previous section, which was motion blur and motion clarity, and the other one is lag, the fastness. That's not a word that exists, but it's the speed that the image can be drawn on the screen and how fast it gets there. So yeah, that's gonna wrap up the technical explanations. So let me do some more screen captures and some of the things I can do with the CRT. Here, for example, I have put an image of a bouncing white ball on a black background, and you can clearly see the afterglow. On the phone, I can see it in both directions, but on the CRT, in reality, you only see it when the ball is falling down. And if you understand the explanation that I did before, you can understand why. Because when the ball falls, the scan lines are always fresh, and the background is, the phosphor is relaxed. But when it falls, the phosphor is still being drawn, so it has a bit of afterglow when it falls down, which is interesting. So the afterglow is always worse when something is moving down on the screen, which is interesting when you play Toho, because most of the things are falling down at you, so you see a lot of afterglow on the bullets, which I can demonstrate on, I think, Toho 6, if I bring it up here. Okay, I got here Toho 6 running, and if we go into practice on stage 4, you can see Reimu's bullets, they have barely any afterglow because they are moving upwards. But you can see the kunai, you can see they have a bit of afterglow, and it's even more visible on the rice bullets. Again, it's because the screen draws stuff from top to bottom, so things that are moving up are gonna have less afterglow than things that are moving down, which is pretty interesting. Yeah, and with that, I'm probably going to conclude this video because it's probably a bit long at this point anyway. So yeah, if you see a CRT thrown on the street next time, you can think about what I said in this video. It's not just some junk that's lying there because someone threw it away because it's unfunctional. In reality, it has many advantages over modern displays. It's just inconvenient. But hey, maybe this inspires you to care for older stuff or have nostalgia for these kinds of displays. But yeah, they are definitely something worth saving in this day and age because CRTs are no longer produced, so at some point there won't be any left. So yeah, with this I will say goodbye, and I will put all the resources in the comment section, or no, in the description. I will put all the resources. I will put the website so you can test the motion clarity on your display and have a laugh at how bad it is in comparison to a 1992 display. I don't know, maybe you are a gamer and have a high-end display and it's not as bad. Maybe you have a potato LCD screen and you won't be able to see anything at all. It's always funny to check that out. I was surprised when I checked my screen because you don't really notice it until someone tells you it. It's something you are oblivious at the beginning. It's really funny. So yeah, what else? Yeah, I'll put some videos in the description of the explanations of more in detail how CRTs work. There's a few types of CRTs. There's the type that I have, which is an older type, and there's Trinitron types, which is a different thing on its own entirely, which have even more advantages and look even better than this one. So yeah, I will say goodbye, and I see you in the next one. Later!